Hartke. Kibler. Maxwell. Quisenberry. Rosales. Schwartz. James. Quorum is present.
Thank you. Next, I'll call for a motion for approval of the minutes from our June 4th meeting.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, I need a motion for the approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion or any changes by anybody? And please note that Mr. Rosales came in. Okay, hearing none, all in favor of the agenda as presented?
Aye. Aye.
Any objections? Good. Next, we have public participation. I haven't received any notice up here, but I see we have some gentlemen out here. Did anybody want to speak? Okay, so we'll move on from there. Next is communications. I really don't have any communications, but I do want to note that we all are well aware that this is Alan's short term now. So this evening, I want us all to be very nice to Alan because he deserves it. And I personally want to say I think Alan and his staff has done wonders keeping our buildings afloat and doing all the needed maintenance as it arises. And for the most part, every one of them that I've ever dealt with have been very professional and very down to earth, and I deeply appreciate that. So Alan, I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any other communications? Deb, anything? Okay, moving right along. Alan, you can take the floor on this courthouse exterior maintenance project update.
On pages 4 and 5 in your agenda is a report supplied by Scott Wachter, principal of IGW. They just gave you an update of where they're at. So basically, they have finished all the on-site observation. They did rent a man lift, bring it around the building and poke and look and take pictures and looked at everything. Most of the scope of work as listed underneath the historic west portion and the east portion of the courthouse addition has not changed. It stays like it is, like it was. On the opinion of probable project costs, they have made a slight adjustment with the to the budget with a 15% construction contingency instead of, if you remember, it was originally a 10. But with that adjustment, that still leaves the total project at $303,170. And if you remember, the original was $304,000. So we're still projecting to come in under at this stage of the game. The project schedule coming up. Today is a report to the facilities. They will be issuing the documents for bidding on August 21st, 2013. They will receive the bids on September 11th. And then we will have board approval of the bids on September 26th. Now, the September 11th bid opening is after next month's facilities committee. So can we get a small committee meeting added to the committee of the whole for approval of these bids if they come in as expected, recommend to the full board?
Yeah, I would have Deb set that up, and if you could just call us, Beth or Deb, and notify us that there'll be a short meeting before the full meeting.
Okay, the county board meeting is September 22nd as well, not 26th.
September 22nd.
So we just need to change that date, the 22nd, not 26th. So a short meeting before that of the committee. like
So
we
you want a short facilities meeting before the county board meeting that night?
Yes.
Which is fine. It will impact caucuses, so just as long as the caucus chairs are aware of that.
Well, if John Jay cuts his dissertation, whatever the word is I was looking for, short that night, I'll be here. So yes, that would, I'd say probably we'll need about a half an hour. Thank you.
Okay, then, the last item on the schedule then was construction. We hope we'll start this fall, but guaranteed to start spring 2014. And that's the end of their report.
Any questions by any committee members? Yes. James?
I guess it's not a lot of money, but I don't know why they would increase the contingency on this. I mean, 10% is pretty standard. Why did they feel the need to push it right back up to what the original amount was by covering that with contingency?
I cannot answer that. They did not give me an explanation other than the fact that they felt that would be appropriate at this stage. It is a contingency, and it's not still anticipated for the actual cost. It is not untypical for a construction project to have multiple contingencies in the design stage, construction phase, and in the closeout phase. And then if if the phase one does not use the contingency, they will take the remaining funds and roll it into the next one just to show where the funds are at. Now, that's possible what they've done, but I can get that answer for you if you would like.
You want to email or have Deb email Mr. Quisenberg?
Certainly.
Anybody else want that information?
Yeah.
Rachel? Anybody else?
The whole committee.
Pardon me? I don't need it.
You don't need, okay.
I'm
The whole
good,
committee,
I'm
I
good
can
with
make it.
15%. Mr. Rosales? That's fine. So everybody but Stan. Anything else on that? Yes.
A question from the other board members.
Patsy?
Yes, I'm sorry somebody isn't here from this firm because I do have some questions, especially the work that's being done on the east portion, remove and replace joint sealants. And in that description, they're talking about having to work with expansion joints and relief angles. And my question has to do with, first of all, this is 10-year-old work that this firm did. And second, we were told that using expansion joints would solve the problem of cracking of the mortar, yet they use expansion joints in the addition and it's cracking there. So I'm a little lost as to why the solution is expansion joints when it's demonstrating itself already in the addition.
Patsy, if I may, you're saying the east side?
That's what it says here.
Well, the east side was that done 10 years ago, Alan?
Yeah, that was
It was?
yes.
Okay. Alan will probably answer that, but I would tell you that working for HACC, Washington Square was a relatively new building, and we had to go in there after 5 to 8 years and completely rehab the shell of that building because of the brick, the cracking, the weep holes had plugged up, what have you. Some of that stuff, even though we all sit here and we question warranties and work, there are many things that come into play with this. Do we like it? No. And when you're saying that these folks did the work, all I can say, Patsy, is knowing what I know about construction, that you can build something today, and there's a lot of things that shift. I don't know what you're really trying to get at with your question, but if it's needed, and it's been shown that it's needed, then why are we I know you want to get to the root cause.
Right, I don't think we've gotten to the root cause, and we're spending over $300,000 in fixing things that we are being told need to be done to the old section, and that's going to solve everything, and in fact, it didn't solve it when it was done, when the addition was put on.
Well, I guess I would tell you, and then I'll let Alan speak, as far as the root cause, I don't think that's going to be very easy to ascertain with all the factors into play. We know that the foundation's stable. We know that other things have been stable. We've had it looked at, not only by this firm, but other firms. When the clock tower was done, testing was done. So, and knowing what I know, and if you don't, I mean, I can go on and on about construction projects, but things do change due to weather, climate, a multitude of other reasons. But all I can tell you is if you go out there and look at it and it needs it, we got to get it done. And even though there's guarantees and they may have done it 10 years ago, I guess nothing lasts forever. Nothing that I'm aware of. So, Alan?
If I may, this building was designed to move, Patsy. It expands, contracts. This is, especially in this climate, we go from extreme heats to extreme colds. It was designed to move. It does move. We installed expansion joints so it could move. And after a bunch of movements, we need to just maintain the expansion joints. And basically, that's what we're doing. We're doing maintenance on the expansion joints from the expansion, contraction. So they're doing their job. The brick is not breaking. It's not really cracking or falling apart. We just need to maintain the expansion joints so that they do not start letting water in, getting water behind the brick and in the joints, freezing, and start popping and spalling brick and stone. So that's what the whole maintenance part of this remove and replace the joint sealants is all about.
Feel free.
Okay, based on your explanation to me, then, that means that the county board in approximately 10 years is going to be doing the same thing again. Is that correct?
It's very likely, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Quisenberry?
I hope that's not the case. I don't know that you can say that necessarily, because a new building moves and may not continue to move in the same way. So, since, as you've pointed out, we don't have a root cause, we should be aware that we might have to continue to do expansion joint maintenance on this building because of its movement. But I don't know that you can say that the next 10 years are going to be like the last 10 years. I think we talked earlier about, what has been the impact of the MTD traffic in that area on that road, which creates a lot of vibration, a lot of passing weight right next to the floor. If the MTD changes how they route those buses, and they do that every so often, every several years, maybe there isn't that same impact. But as you pointed out, we don't know what the root cause is. We may not, because of the variables involved, be able to determine the root cause.
Questions? Thank you. So was there anything we needed to do other than what we just did as far as the dates, Alan, on that?
Nope.
Okay, that was information only. Thank you. Moving right along, the next one is the IAW water main easement along Art Bartell Road. It's information only.
Mr. Chairman, did we skip number 8 there? Capital improvements projections.
Yes, you did.
Oh, I did. I'm sorry, because I scratched off mine. I apologize. Backing up, capital improvements projections, primary building equipment, and we're looking at funding, county facilities, primary building equipment, and it's in your packet, Alan and Deb.
Okay, I'll take the first part if I may. The overview is a basic explanation of how and why I chose the equipment I chose to add to the data that's shown on the following spreadsheet. I tried to choose specific large capital expenditures. Planning for design for replacement would be required by professional services. A long lead time for the replacement of the equipment before installation could start. A failure of equipment will cause the building or a large part of the building to become non-usable. So I didn't take every piece of equipment. I just took the big, expensive ones that we have to really pay attention to. And I'd also like to say that all of this primary equipment does have the ancillary systems, and some of them simple, some of them very complex. Those are not taken into consideration in this report. And another example is Pod 100 Brookins. There's nothing listed there because there are multiple individual rooftop units, and each one can be addressed individually, not considered a primary piece of building equipment. Now, I have taken then the manufacturer description and year installed and used that for the basis of the selection. And then I tried to give every piece an original installation value. And all of that information we had, I put in from our records. The original installation value is important. I tried to get it accurate. I also would like to make sure that you understand we did not have all the information on all the original equipment. So if we had like pieces of equipment in one building or in different buildings, I tried to keep them all grouped the same so that we would have a comparable number. So you will see numbers in the spreadsheet that are the same from building to building. That is because they are like equipment of each other. So we have a relatively solid base to try to work off of. The estimated life expectancy, I tried to use, well, first of all, of course, you know the life expectancy is can be determined by many things. The quality of the item, the planning and care taken during the design and installation, the type of environment it lives in, and the type of maintenance it receives. And without a complete facility condition assessment for each building, each piece of equipment, to tell us exactly what we have, I used the global life expectancy following the actual equipment replacement timeline we've experienced over the last 20 years here at the county. And this life expectancy is arguably longer than other entities have used, and I supplied an example of some information I found from the Wheaton Park District, which they published. So an example, HVAC, they're showing 10 to 20 years. We're going 20 to 25, depending on the units, items like that. The estimated replacement value then is calculated by using a straight 3% increase per year. And this is, for most times, this is a relatively safe assumption, however, you know that this may place some of the actual replacement costs way above or way below the actual replacement cost, depending on all kinds of things, manufacturing, petroleum products, you know, global products. Okay? So with that, I have supplied you the list on page 8, 9, and a little bit on page 10. And you can see that we can go predicting at the courthouse clear out to the year 2037. And we are far behind as in some items we should have replaced in 1990 or 2007. And I'm not going to pick out any particular item and talk about them. If anyone has any questions, I can answer those. But what I did give you on page 11 is just a snapshot of 1990 through 2023, with the year 2013 today is right in the middle of the page. And you can see that we are behind in some areas, but if you look to the future, you can see that in 2020, 2022, those 3 years when our courthouse, some of our newer buildings become of age, because we have put a lot of new buildings up in the last 5 to 7, 10 years, we can expect a lot of major replacements looking ahead. So now, if anyone has any questions on that, I'll be happy to answer. If not, I will turn it over to Deb for her part of the report there.
Any questions? Rachel?
Just a quick question, is that equipment or installation too? When you talk about cost, is that total cost or just the?
Excuse me, yes, that is a total cost.
Quiz?
Can you let me know what's entailed in a juvenile detention center building automation system? Is that just the HVAC controls, or is it other things?
That is primary HVAC controls, but the newer systems now will be integrated, can and should be integrated with the fire alarm system and probably smoke evacuation systems. But primary HVAC, yes.
So it's basically the brain of the building these
Yes.
days. Thanks.
Any other questions? I guess I would just say, when I reviewed this chart and looking at the date of some of that equipment and the assumptions that are made, one thing that's sort of stuck out to me when I do depreciation for the corporation and worked on it when I was at the Housing Authority, the table that Alan has given to us is basically what I use, the life expectancy table. When you get a manufacturer's warranty, and I don't know, Alan can speak to this, but a lot of equipment, once you get it up, the most I've ever had on some refrigeration and that has probably been 5 years. The warranty doesn't extend much past that. If anything breaks down, you're liable for it. There are some new equipment that they come out with a 10-year warranty on furnaces and stuff like that. But also, I would guess at this point that some of this equipment is probably not as energy efficient as what's out there today. When we've worked with boilers and air conditioners, a lot of that stuff has changed. It's more lightweight, it's more compact, more energy efficient, and I think that the cost to put it back in probably isn't as great as what it used to be because of the labor involved to do so, other than if you're changing a lot of lines. Correct?
Correct, yes.
So we need to look at this. We've asked for this. It's all here now. The only other thing I'm going to ask Alan to do before he leaves, him and his staff, I would like to see a report on all the parking lots that the county owns, so we know, because I noticed tonight when I pulled up here at Brookins, there's some serious cracks happening and grass popping up where it shouldn't be, but I know that does take place. But if we don't stay on top of it, in the long run, we could end up milling it all down and paying a lot more money. So if someone could get a report on that, and by next month, I would hope, or within the next 2 months, I'd appreciate it. Quiz?
Yeah, a couple more things. First of all, I think it would be helpful when we're looking at something like this to, in addition to the part of the packet, to get the spreadsheet available to board members, because then you can sort things by cost and year and, flip things around a little bit more if you're so inclined to play with spreadsheets like that. I'm not going to give that to you, Alan, because you don't have to worry about it. But a question for you, Alan, on the Pod 300, the air handling units that are from 1970 that should have been replaced 23 years ago, are they functioning well enough that they're not on this list?
They are functioning well enough that they're not on this.
So they're not urgent, they're not
They
critical?
are urgent, but they're not the most critical item we have.
Okay,
I'm serious.
so they're kind of orange, they're not red?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because those kind of stand out to me as things that are, on this list that I wonder why they're not higher up.
Are they used all year round, or?
That is correct, and they are truly a pain, and they're not working well. They're not very efficient, but they are working. And they're not number one on the list strictly because we have more critical issues.
Any other questions? I think there's a recommendation to go along with this report. No.
No, that's Deb's.
That's next.
Yeah.
Deb?
Well, taking this report and putting it into financial terms is kind of what I've attempted to do, starting on page 12. Basically, all of this equipment is primarily the responsibility of the general corporate fund. I pointed out on page 12 that we do still have a balance of $517,000 in courts construction after we complete the project that was talked about earlier in this meeting. If you would go to page 15, what I would like to focus on is an analysis of the funding for these items. So if you look in the blue column, that basically takes each item and documents what would be the annual reserve if that item had been placed on a reserve schedule at the time that it was installed, so that it could be replaced by the year that it is to be replaced. And the idea there is the idea that we use for capital asset replacement, And if you look at Alan's graph on page 11, what that does is insulate us against huge budget spikes because we reserve every year for everything that we need to do. So if we had always done that and had that in place, the annual cost to the general corporate fund would be $318,185 for all of this equipment. And that should give you a snapshot of if we can get this back on track at some point in the future, the budget will come down to a number that's more similar to that. But where we are today, if we were to completely document the reserve so that we were budgeting each year to replace these items in the years in which we think they would need to be replaced, that would be the green column on the spreadsheet on page 15. And that would require funding of $2.2 million in fiscal year 2014 from general corporate. If in the alternative, we decided that we would replace only those items that are scheduled to be replaced up to 2014, in fiscal 2014, the required funding would be right at $1.6 million. And then in 2015 and beyond, the annual funding requirement would be about $960,000 for the items remaining. We really can't afford any of that. We can't afford $2.2 million. We can't afford $1.6 million. So what we have done is we've collaborated and listed the items that are determined are critical and that do need replacement in the immediate future in order to ensure that the buildings in which they're situated continue operating. And these are items that if we go ahead and budget for these items in fiscal 2014, hopefully we wouldn't be coming to the county board as we did a couple years ago when the boilers collapsed at the downtown correctional center or things like that, asking for budget amendments. It is the opinion of Alan and his staff that these are items that are at that kind of risk if we don't do something with them in the near future. So those top 5 items are the chiller for Brookins Pod 300, the chiller for Brookins Pod 200, the satellite jail water heater, and the JDC building automation system and water heater number 1, for a total of $436,200. This is in addition to new appropriation requested by this committee earlier this year for roof replacements in 2014 of about $313,000. And so the recommendation to you this evening is that you recommend to the Finance Committee that this appropriation be included in the fiscal plant 2014 budget as a transfer to capital asset replacement, which is where we would then put the money so that as these projects are undertaken, this committee is undertaking them, and if we don't do them all next year, the money still remains in capital asset replacement in the following year for that project when it can be accomplished. And I would just point out there's one typo on page 14 under requested action. It's 436,200, not 463,200.
Just to clarify, so you're not saying that we necessarily would go ahead with these projects, but rather reserve for them since they seem to be the most likely to actually have to be taken, but there's no particular reason to go with these because something else can fall apart. I mean, not
Right.
as likely, but
Right.
but
And-
somewhat likely as well,
Right.
right? So
And
it's a matter of how, basically you're saying we have to put at least that much aside.
Yes.
That's pretty much it.
And I think it's very likely that the number one item, I would hope that the facilities director and facilities committee would go ahead with that one because this pod is extremely uncomfortable very frequently because that chiller is just very unreliable at this point. So I think those 2 chillers are critical. Obviously, the other items are determined to be critical as well. We wouldn't do them all starting in December, so there would be some flexibility in planning by the facilities director and department as to how to implement throughout the year.
Yeah, because my concern is that those might look like the most
Yeah.
urgent, but many others can fall
That's
apart just
exactly
as
right.
well. So just because we say let's reserve it and take care of that doesn't mean we took care of whatever necessary next year.
That's exactly right, yes. And the same is true of the money
Right.
we're replacing in for roof replacement.
Right.
So there's a total of over $700,000 of new money coming from general corporate into capital asset replacement to deal with these facilities issues. And yeah, we would just have to try and do our best at making sure that we spend it on where it was most critically needed.
Before we go on discussion.
Yeah, I think I got some feedback on this today and, from someone who looked at the agenda, and, I think it was a reasonable question to ask. You know, there are several things on here that involve our, judicial system, and we're going to be getting a report very shortly that may adjust where we're headed with our facilities in that manner, or at least guide us to adjust where we're going. And while I don't think we'll turn on a dime with that, I think the picture here is we're building a budget. So we're using, Alan's best judgment as to what the most important things are and what we decided to do as far as building the capital reserve with that $318,000. But we're not locking ourselves into doing these 5 things based on what happens. So we're going to have to deal with what comes, first of all, and then we may choose some different paths or prioritize other things over the course of the next year based on what we learn from ILPP or what guidance we get there. So I'm not hung up on the 5 things that are listed here because I know it's a blueprint. It's a budget. The budget is a plan. It's not handcuffs that say you have to do this. So I think this is sound. I wish we could do more, but when you're being fiscally responsible, you can't always do more. So there we are.
Just add, following on quiz then, is that I agree with that. As you heard Deb say earlier, we really haven't had a reserve or a plan, and this has been a sticking point for some of us for years. I don't know, in a county this large and with the assets we have under roof, you have to have some funds somewhere because things happen. We saw at the nursing home this past year with the boiler that went down all of a sudden. We've had the downtown jail, where we had to work on a chiller, which cost us a lot of money at the time. And then we're scrambling to find the funds and cutting here or there maybe to get those funds. So by doing this, and what Quiz said is absolutely right, nothing is locked in stone. If this roof would fall down tomorrow and we had that money in the bank, guess where that money's going to go? It's going to go on this roof because that's an emergency item. The other things will step back a little bit. But we must keep in mind that sooner or later, even though we do that those items are going to need work, and that's why we're setting up this fund. So instead of always saying we're going to take it from here or whatever we may do to get the money, we don't have to worry as much. And I think that was the intent. Deb?
Yeah, and I think the budget documents will document the items and the bases for which these dollar amounts were identified. But for you all to be aware, none of these projects that are listed on page 13 will occur unless this committee authorizes the release of bids, with the exception of the Juvenile Detention Center Building Automation System. That's a small enough item that it could be done without coming here for bids first. And I think the same is true of the roofs. So I don't think we want to transfer this money, some $700,000, to capital asset replacement and wait for bad things to happen, because nothing bad may happen. So you will see as you go through the year probably, 1 or 2 or 3 of these things coming to you for recommendation for release of bid so that we can proceed with it. But certainly you will be in control of how that gets done throughout the year, because you will approve it before anything happens. So I hope that that kind of further explains the concerns that you're expressing.
Thank you. When I read this memorandum and the previous information, it is very helpful. But I would like to build on what Rachel and James are saying in establishing elasticity. And that elasticity, one factor of that elasticity that seems to be missing in this memorandum is doing due diligence to see if grants are available to do any of these pieces of work on any of the buildings. And if and when we find grants available, they may be grants for something that isn't up at the top of the list, but for it to be brought to the facility committee to evaluate if it's important to take advantage of the fact that there is money available to do something that maybe is further down the list and not overlook that opportunity of actually saving the county long-term money. And I don't see anything about grants in this memorandum.
I'm fairly certain that whenever Alan has had a project like this, he has always looked for grants to see if there was anything available when it was time to address one of those projects. I believe that that will continue. I think Facilities Director and also with the new Deputy County Administrator of Finance, that we would definitely be looking for grant funding if it were available for any project that we are about to undertake. And I can, I can confirm that that would be a practice that we would follow. Well, there's no way of knowing if grants will be available, so it's a little bit difficult to write it into a financial recommendation, but it is certainly something that we would look for.
And I'd just like to inform the committee that I was contacted by Illinois American Water at the 2007, 2008, with the completion of the new nursing home. We had entered an agreement with the Illinois American Water Company that we would turn over ownership of the new water main that we built down along Art Bartell Road and around the nursing home, so that they could take care of the maintenance on it. And I thought at that time all the paperwork and documentation was taken care of. At the end of the conversation, of the phone call and the emails, they must have lost the papers or something. So we're doing it again. And I just wanted this committee to know that it has not been documented and that we had to do a little bit of survey work. So that we're going to remark the entire main, put it documented on paper, and go through the paperwork again. And then it will be officially recorded that the water main along Art Bartell belongs to Illinois American Water, and they will be responsible for, as they have been for the last 3 years, repairing and maintaining it. Just a little housekeeping work.
Okay. You have a question, Gary?
Perhaps Deb can help us. Do we have the legal authority to transfer that easement? Has that been granted by the board previously so that we actually can transfer that portion of our ownership?
I cannot say that I remember going to the full board, but at that time, Mr. Inman was a county administrator in charge of facilities, and I assumed it was, but that should be pretty simple to check and see.
I would think that Illinois American would want that. It can easily be done. It's just something we probably are going to have to clean up if it hasn't been done.
Okay.
Any other questions? Next agenda item, recommendation of Illinois Green Business Association Certification Program. Alan?
I'll be honest with this committee. I have had a little bit of correspondence, and I've done a little bit of research, and this is the application we received and the information. I have not had time to make a recommendation or follow up with all the other work I was trying to get completed, so Don't know if you want to continue, well, whatever this committee wishes now.
Well, I'll open it up, but first, before we open up for discussion, does anybody want to make a motion on it?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that we issue a contract or whatever, not sure on the terminology here, issue a contract with Illinois Green Business Association for the amount of $1,500 to have them come in and start their green business certification on Brookins Building.
Do we have a second?
Second.
And now we can open it up for discussion, Josh.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Ryan Walber from Illinois Green Business Association is here to answer any further questions people have had. They spoke to us at our green energy study session and have addressed this committee once before. And they have a lot of things, they've worked with several large local businesses, are expanding to even closer to more of a nationwide aspect in their business. There are a lot of things they can do for us, some of which I'm sure they will only know once they get in here and see the details. But looking at this list tonight, we're talking about replacing 2 chillers in this building next year. We're talking about, future roofing issues for this building, the air handling units from the 1970s. I'm sure Illinois Green Business Association will have some very good recommendations on us for that. They can give us access to the very granting resources that Patsy was talking about, as well as other things. So I'll just leave it open for people to ask Ryan any questions and see how they feel.
Gary,
May I ask a question of you, Josh?
Mike,
Okay, sorry.
that's all right.
Josh, if you may help me with this, does this motion include that we're going to include this in the FY14 budget and also do the work in the FY14 as well, pay for it in FY14?
Yes, Deb did send, thank you very much for the corrected email, to move this into the 2014 budget and to begin this project December 1 of 2014 with the start of the new financial year. Which, if I may also, that will very much coincide with our new facilities director coming in, whom I hope we look at as someone who's got, a lot of knowledge on building green practices in buildings and things. I think it could be a great help to this new employee, as well as helping us look at where we can find prioritization on these very lists we've been talking about tonight.
So the $1,500 certification we're talking about will address the items you were just talking about?
Yes.
Because when they were talking about here, they were talking about, we'll look at your lighting, we'll look at this, we'll look at that. And there was no mention of, we're going to look at some major items like that. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on.
Usually speak loud anyway. No, we'll look at the entire complex. Our checklist goes through, in the energy section, as you're speaking of, employee practices to HVAC. So we will look at your HVAC system if you would like us to pursue that option. The checklist has over 200 items, and it's very, very flexible. You have to pick 50% to get certified. So some businesses prefer to do more employee engagement, but we can take a microscope lens and look into your HVAC, make recommendations for energy efficient equipment as well. I can't.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'll answer that. I think you're completely right. We ought to focus on what we can do specifically. But I think also there's potential for us to find good policies that then, the state's attorney would be willing to adopt. We can give them some guiding light on some things. And of course, their offices are not in Brookings, so it won't be a part. But yeah, going down the road. But you're right, county clerk's office, for example, we would not be able to tell them you have to do this, I assume. But I would also say we have budgetary control, so if you don't do this, you're going to lose some of your power bill money. I mean, if we have to go down that route, but I'm assuming most countywide officials are going to want to make their offices more efficient. I'm assuming they will, so.
Anybody else have any questions? Well, go ahead, Gary. Go ahead. I had some of Ryan, but go ahead. No. Ryan, I got a couple questions for you, sir. On your estimate, you're saying it's $1,500. That's your total cost?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what about our staff time when you're doing this study? Does it involve a lot of our staff time to help you to do this study, or do you all do it on your own?
For the most part, we'll do it on our own, but it will require some of your staff time. However, we can compensate that by all the additional staff time that we will provide before and after certification for the marketing, for the follow-up, for additional behavior change research, surveying to make sure that the equipment's being utilized to the optimal functionality. But it will require a little bit of staff time, but it'll be more on the IGBA end. We take all the heavy lifting, point in the direction of where you would like to go, and we'll find the answers for you.
Okay, but do you have any estimate at all, roughly, of what our staff would have to be involved in?
Typically, we'll meet with a business owner or a manager once every 2 to 3 weeks for an hour. And that is for small businesses to large facilities like the Marriott Hotel and for all Busey banks. So it really is not too intensive from my standpoint. Everyone will have a different definition, but 1 hour every 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay. And then following up on that, so do you have a staff of people that come in that are expertise in heating and air conditioning and lighting, or is this just simply a checklist that you go through and you look at light switches and room amenities, or are you sending technicians in to, like we did with the boiler system, give us readings and stuff like that? What's the bottom line there?
For the items that we do not have expertise in, deep technical expertise like you spoke of, we have program analysts and partners that we can arrange and play that bridge to find those answers that you're looking for. But for the most part, all those skills and knowledge are in-house.
Okay. So following up on that, that was a good answer. You ought to run for office. So does anybody do those necessary checks that I just spoke about, or is it, again, a checklist that you look at and you say, yes, they have a heating and air conditioning system that was installed in this year, we've noticed maybe the vents closed? I mean, is anybody physically checking the temperature, the rise, the overall operation? Are they going through all that?
If our program analysts will go in, yes, they will. They will check that.
If they go in?
If you request them to go in, because
If we request them to go
Yes.
in, is there more cost?
no.
Okay. I just want to make perfectly
I
clear that,
understand.
you know, in my book, when I've worked with other things, that if I go in with a checklist, is the screens in the window? Well, yeah, they're there, but are they torn? Are they, doing their job? Anybody can have a checklist. I just want to make sure, and I know 1,500 isn't going to buy the world, but when I'm getting an energy audit done, I want to know that the folks doing it really understand what they're doing, that they're not just coming in with a pad of paper checking things off. So that answers some of that questions, and I won't beat you up over it, because everybody always tells me I'm not a lawyer, but I should have been.
You're fine.
Next, bottom line question for me, and I asked you this before. If we do this and we get our certification, what actual benefit, because we keep hearing about grants, but we have people that already apply for grants, does this help us get a grant? Does this put the grant on our table without us knocking on the door? What does it do for us?
Very good question. The answer is a little ambiguous because the checklist is so diverse. It will depend, what you see out of this will depend on what you put into it. Busey Bank, they save $300,000 per year from all the energy efficiency upgrades we helped install. Common Ground Food Co-op, from behavior change and engaging the employees, and the water efficient upgrades, they're seeing several $100s of savings through water bills, but they're doing more community engagement. So it really will depend on the route you would choose to go through the certification, but you will see our man hours and our help and our resources going for grants and going for the maximum energy savings, community engagement that you would like to see. I hope that answers your question.
Well, that helps, but I guess I keep hearing that whatever we decide to go through, and I keep hearing, okay, for 1,500, we're going to be certified if we pass, but it sounds like to me that there's more of a, maybe more money that we would have to expend to get some other items if we needed them?
There is a possibility of that. If there is more money that you need to spend for possible other items, we would assist in trying to find grants or find other avenues to get that funding. but that's always a possibility, yes.
And you said you helped Busey Bank with their upgrades and saved them 300 and some thousand?
30,000.
Okay, excuse me.
Sorry.
I
my
like
bad.
to inflate numbers. When you say you helped them, did you physically have teams go in and do the work, or did you just point them in the right direction?
We partnered with utility companies. I know that may not necessarily attribute to this facility due to the governance structure, but we will assist in finding other funding opportunities or installation programs that could install those upgrades.
And is there a cost to that?
Not that I'm aware of for those programs, but we would address that if necessary.
Okay, any other questions? Geraldo?
How long would the project take from beginning to completion?
Average project length can be anywhere between 8 months to a year, but we have seen businesses go through it in 3 months.
And then, once you complete the checklist, you will make recommendations as to how we could improve our efficiency and do a second walkthrough to make sure that perhaps those little stickers that they put on the light switches that says, if you're not in the room, please turn off the lights, that, would educate the staff and the workers within the facilities. Would you make those recommendations upon a second visit?
Yes, actually, once you're certified, then we'll be doing check-ins every 3 to 4 months, and we can address any additional issues. If you feel the strategy may not be working to its maximum capacity, we can create a report to try to rearrange that strategy to really get the most benefit out of that initiative. So yes, we will do a check-in and make sure what has been put into place is working every 3 to 4 months.
Okay, and then that would be displayed as like licenses usually are displayed at the entryway of a facility or a restaurant saying, we have passed inspection.
Yes.
Would this be a plaque that would be situated in a visible location so that everybody that comes into the facilities knows that this is a certified green building, or?
Yep, the plaque can be put anywhere you guys would like it to be placed. You also have our window decals, furthermore, our logos to be placed on the website if you would so choose. Any marketing materials you have and how you would like to make this as public as possible, we will provide.
Okay, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I would kind of not go too far as to think that we would get certified, considering what equipment we have. So I'm thinking it could be called a certification or whatever program, but I think of it as more as identifying where we can get better. This is not going to be a LEED certified building, okay? Let's set it, I don't think you need to do your inspection to know that that's not going to happen. I can tell you that right now and save the $1,500 if that's what you want. I seriously think they're going to help us identify, and hopefully with these big items of how we can better, or where are we going to get more benefit for the cost or something like that. We will not get certified as anything energy efficient anytime soon without a huge investment in replacing some major ticket items. Maybe I'm wrong, but is there?
I'm not going to respond to
You can.
that. I guess, Rachel, following up on yours, that's my hang-up with this. I would almost lay money on the table, and I'm not a betting man by any means, other than on Friday nights, that we probably won't get certified because of all the things that this building needs or will need. We've had studies done before. We have a list of items here that we're well aware of. I'm just looking, I know everybody always says, well, it's not much money, it's $1,500. But to have another study come in when we know we don't have the funds to probably do the things that are going to be recommended, as you've heard tonight, you saw that list. We already know where we're headed. I don't know if the cost, I guess I look at my own home and I think, okay, if I pay someone, and I've had an energy audit done, just for your information, and the guy told me I'd done everything right, but I still had to pay. And I thought, well, that was sort of mean because that could have went toward my utility bill. But I'm just having a hard time with it because if we were at that stage and we've done some of this upgrade and we pay professional people that come in that work with engineering firms and architects, and I would venture to guess that they're probably just as in tune to a lot of these things as your staff, as you're claiming may be. So here we're going to pay another $1,500 for someone to tell us what someone's gonna tell us when we need to get it replaced. And all the little things that we've done so far in this building, which we've done lighting, we've gotten grants for that. I think sometimes this group forgets that. We've put in sensor switches, which I hit my head on the wall all the time, and I'm thinking seriously about seeing a doctor because they don't come on when they're supposed to. But I really don't see the benefit in my mind, other than a certificate. And if you come to my office, I can probably show you more certificates than you care to see. And I know, Josh, you're raising your hand. So I just want to make sure that when this group looks at this, that we do this all the time, and it's that, I like to call it, and people can get mad, that feel-good thing. Oh, we're doing the right thing, we're marching to the right drummer. But spending money without really knowing what the end result is, or knowing that it's going to benefit us, is it a wise thing to do? So I'll leave the floor, Josh.
Actually, may I respond to a few of your
Go right
comments?
ahead,
Thank
please.
you very much. Those are all valid concerns. I do want to state the only business and groups that have not completed our certification program, because it is so flexible and because we will hold your hand and walk with you for the entire process, was a business that ran out of business, was Flet's Bookstore. They are no longer in business, so that's the only organization. So I know you have your concerns of not completing certification, but I'm not concerned about it, because that's the average lifespan, the length for the project. But if it takes 2 years, it takes 2 years, and we'll be with you for those 2 years until you're certified. So I understand that is a concern, but I wanted to address that concern, saying it's not a timeline of, if you guys aren't finished in a year, we drop you from the program. That's not how we work. So I would like to just make that statement. Thank you.
I'm gonna call him Josh, but before I do, how long have you been with the company?
I've been with the organization for 8 months.
First off, the Illinois Green Business Association is full of qualified professionals who have many qualifications. And I don't think that every time we've called contractors in here, they've been green specific or green specialized. I just don't think that they all carry that information around in their pocket as much as these guys have directly at their access. I also want to add that we just blew 300 grand on a courthouse that may or may not fix a problem with cracking, and we're going through half an hour here on $1,500, when the goal to me is not a piece of paper on the wall. The goal to me is to save money on electricity in this building and other buildings. The goal to me is to be environmentally responsible, to deal with carbon remediation, to deal with the fact that our planet is changing. Now, I know there's some people around this table who just do not want to believe that, but it is. And I think a majority, not only of my constituents, but of this board and this committee, accept that that's going on. And we're trying to find ways to deal with that. Now, if we save money in the meantime, goodness gracious, amen, that's a great thing. But to me, the importance of the green action, the environmental action, is just as important as saving the money, which we're obviously able to move forward on. I mean, they've saved Busey Bank money, they're going to be able to find a way to save us money. And to me, the idea that we can't get certified just goes to show that we need to get them in here telling us what is wrong with this building, what we can do to improve it. If this building is so far behind that we're certain we can't get certified, then we need to get them in here to help us find out what's wrong and do the work to get it more efficient, to get it more certified. And yes, it's going to take an investment, but we're right here talking about investments in this building, $100 and some thousand for a chiller, when we could certainly, with their help, look not only for grant money for that, but find an environmentally efficient chiller, the best choice that's going to not only save us energy, but cause less carbon emissions while we're doing it. So that's where I'm coming from on that.
I got wrapped up in him, I'm sorry.
Few more minutes, but I'm just gonna share an anecdote, because I got nothing better, but in 2005, I was looking at replacing what I will call a gas guzzling vehicle, and I was looking at buying a Prius, a hybrid vehicle, because I wanted to spend less on gas. But I as much as I went through and did the numbers, I couldn't make it work. I couldn't say, I'm going to get my money back that I'm going to spend on this new car in gas savings. But I went ahead and did it because it was a lower emission vehicle as well. It's not a low emission vehicle, but it's a fairly low emission vehicle. And a few months later, Hurricane Katrina came through and devastated our ability to produce gas for a while in New Orleans. And a couple of months later, over the life of that vehicle, it did financially pay off. I didn't make the decision because of the dollars I was going to get in my pocket. I made the decision because I thought I would save some money on gas, but I couldn't justify it on the capital, but I justified it on the change in my behavior and what I was contributing to the pollution. And in the end, because these things don't get better over time. You know, fossil fuels aren't going to get better over time. Energy costs are not going to go down a lot over time. We may find other ways to pull it in. We may find other ways to mitigate it, but they're just going to keep going up. So, you know, I got no problems with spending $1,500 to find, you know, if it's $2,000 and we're leaving a smaller footprint, great. That's fine by me. We're leaving a smaller footprint. But I know that, you know, in 10 years from now, that smaller footprint's going to be worth, you know, 10 times as much, 20 times as much, as long as we've taken that step. So that's why I'm going to support it.
If I may add something, if that's fine. Thank you very much. You've all brought up amazing concerns, and thank you for your questions. I really appreciate it. And I'd like to address your concern on our staff's ability to complete this project. And my coworker is preparing to take the lead associate exam so that she'll have the knowledge and the skills of lead. I am a certified lead associate, and I'm taking my lead professional exam in 2 months. So we'll take those skills and those knowledge from a certified body and apply them at a much, much lower cost than you would see at the USGBC. Lead is fantastic, but it is quite expensive. Our program is highly subsidized through donations and grants. So I just want to make that point. Thank you.
I hadn't intended to talk on this because I thought this was a done deal. But however, it does not seem to be the case. So I will share what I spent 60 minutes doing today with a constituent who called me up and asked to talk to me about the huge amount of money the county spends on all utilities. Now, she quoted me $850,000. I don't know if that's accurate. I didn't run home and go through all the pages of the budget and add up all the gas, electricity, and water costs, but that's the number the individual put before me. And the individual also said, why is the county spending that kind of money when I know how much less it costs in utilities for Unit 4, and Unit 4 owns at least 30% more buildings, maybe 40% more buildings. And I had no answers for the individual. And now I'm sitting and listening to basically haggling over $1,500 that might begin to put the county in a position of finally making some kind of statement that the county is actually concerned about what they want to do and model for the two communities and the rest of the county in using taxpayer money in a fiduciarily responsible way and related to what we spend on utilities on the number of buildings that we own as a county. I find it amazing that this has gone on for the length of time it's gone on, and that we as a county are not stepping forward to being a lead entity within the county to model how important green and sustainable aspects are for our whole county.
Well, Patsy, I've got to follow up on that, because I hear this all the time. I've been here 10 years. Studies have been done. I know Deb and Alan and everybody's worked when we joined in and we lowered the electric and gas rates. They put out memos as far as conserving and doing the best we can, which I think that will be some of the report that we get back about cutting waste here and there. I look at money when you talk about taxpayers, and Josh's comment that we just blew 300 and some thousand. Well, that's a matter of opinion. We get it, there again, we get experts telling us we need this stuff, just like this gentleman is saying his experts are going to give us a report. I think it depends on how someone wants to view the facts and how they want to put it in place. You know, comparing another entity to our entity, we're 24/7. Unit 4 isn't a 24/7, you know? Well, but that makes a difference. And, you know, controlling human behavior is probably the biggest part of any energy audit thing. You know, turning out lights, not flushing your toilet as much as the next guy, so on and so on. I'm not against a study. What I'm trying to figure out is we do studies. We have studies. They get lost or they set back because this board always wants to go on to something else. We've been trying for years to get some type of budget in place to maintain these buildings. These buildings, whether they have new equipment or not, are going to fall down around us if we don't start taking care of them. 1,500, I could write you a check tomorrow for that, but I'm not going to. You know, and it's the taxpayers that are always footing this bill, Patsy, not you, not I, not anybody else sitting here. Well, that's great.
I represent taxpayers too, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you for correcting me. I stand corrected again. But we need to be mindful of that, and we do a lot of studies. And we have people on staff that are good. You know, they're out there every day seeing this stuff and telling us. This gentleman's going to come in here, he's going to give us a list of suggestions and recommendations. Hopefully we'll have the funds to do some of them. I don't think we will. We haven't yet. I mean, we've done a lot of lighting and everything else. I'm sorry, sir, but for one, I'm not going to spend any more money. Quiz. Motion on the floor to spend the money, $1,500 to do this study. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Page 22 and 23 of your agenda. Of course, everyone knows that ILEAS is the county property, is leasing the county property at 721 East Main. Their current lease will expire December 31st, 2013. And this current lease includes various different items here. A 120,000 total square foot of the main building, which is 52,620 square feet of the 1971 edition, of which 32,120 square feet has been remodeled. The remaining area has not. They also have two west heated bays in the metal buildings out here at 1705, another heated bay in another storage building right adjacent to it, and approximately half of the old highway maintenance building at 1707. So that's the space that we do lease for ILEAS. Okay, basic calculations there of the way the lease is written, $5 a square foot for the conditioned space, and, you know, approximately $2.08 for the other space total. Of course, after discussion with Mr. Page, the ILEAS director, he would like to renew his lease, but he has expressed some serious concerns about the east section of the annex building, and has never been used for the training area. It has multiple roof leaks, loose floor tiles, and it is deteriorating rapidly. And he asked that we would consider demolishing it. So you have a handout showing the overview of the building, just so you can identify it. The little clouded area is the section that he's talking about. The second page of that handout is a blow-up with the hash mark of the section that, so it's identified so it's clear for everyone to understand what we're talking about. Now, with that, I'm going to stop here and let Kirk, I took a few photographs, and he's going to give us show us some pictures and give us a little explanation of what you're looking at.
Just a real quick show and tell. This section is the east end of the east half of that building. There's quite a bit of damage on the exterior of the building. If you look at the brick there, that's pretty typical of the condition of the building itself. This part of the building was built in 1944. The west half was finished in 1941. We were told at one point that the brick on this half was not nearly as good a quality as that on the other half because it was made during wartime. As you can see, there's been a lot of water penetration on the face of the brick. And if you take a look on the left part of this picture, you'll see above this window, it looks kind of dirty. There's some moss and stuff there. In the late 90s, we had this section over here actually looked like this section. We had a company come in and give us a price on cleaning, retuck pointing, and sealing the building, and it was just too much. We couldn't afford it. So we did the cleaning ourselves, and you can see in some of the pictures I'll show you, we did some of the caulking, but we didn't get any of the work done professionally, and this is kind of what we've ended up with. Yes. Yes, right here. Yes, it is. Yeah, the building has, and you'll see once we get inside the building, it has quite a few issues with mold even. Another picture. This kind of shows, you can see the different colors in brick right here. This section actually was replaced, I believe it was in the 60s, where they had some serious problems and took care of that at that point, but it's continued into the rest of the building. This is the separation of the two buildings. You can tell by the brick that there's actually, it's a different style. You can see where in the 41 building there it's been caulked, but we don't have the flaking in that part of the building like we do in the rest of it. This is one of the many leaks inside. This is pretty typical of the rooms. We've had roof leaks there. The last time I counted in this part of the building, in the annex itself, there were 27 leaks, 25 which were on the east half. The building there, the roof there is in much worse shape than that on the west side. The floor tiles, most of those in the rooms themselves are tiles. The hallways have mostly been replaced with rolled vinyl, but the halls or the rooms have the tiles. The tiles do have a bit of asbestos in them. The mastic that's holding it down has asbestos in it as well, so that kind of prevents us from going in and doing a full abatement to get rid of it. It's another leak. It's a little hard to see. This is one of the plaster walls that the wall straight ahead, you can see a little bit of the window. That's an outside wall. The one on the left is actually an interior wall where the water has actually penetrated into the wall space itself and started to deteriorate from the inside. Another window leak. And there you can see a little bit of mold on the wall. And again, the tile. And that's back to the beginning. So.
He had his hand up, so quiz? That section in the inside where the wall was really damaged, is that coming from that particular corner? Or
You know what, it's
corner
actually.
is that water coming in from?
No, it's actually this window right here. That's just the inside of that room. This shows the outside. This is the courtyard side. And I can go back to, if you'd like to see.
And then I wanted to comment on the leaks. You said 27, is that 27 different holes?
Yes.
Or is that basically water coming in out of one section and then leaking through that suspended ceiling throughout, and then it appears that it is 27?
It's 27 separate sections in different rooms. Now, it's possible some of them are close enough that it could be coming through one penetration, following across the deck, and then coming down in different spots. But it's exposed itself within the building in those 27 different spots. So, and most of the places that we looked at, we had a roofer come in and go through and identify. I don't remember the exact number of tears that he saw, but it's also not just the penetrations on the roof. Let's see if I can get back to another picture. The coping, see if I can magnify. If you look at the capstone or the coping stone, you can see where the caulking there is out. You can actually see where that piece is kind of heaved a little bit. So the ability for water to get in there and follow that stone all the way along the top and enter the building at any of the perforations along that wall And this is pretty typical of the entire building with the coping zone.
And that's a flat roof
Yes, sir.
that would need total replacement if,
Yes, sir.
I see. Okay, thank you.
I'm kind of moving ahead. I have a question about the lease.
Well, let's finish this up, please.
Okay.
Is that mold growing on the outside of that building there? Some green?
It's possible. There are spots all along there.
And with that flat roof, I would surmise there's probably some structural damage to the,
To the decking underneath it, yes. Yeah, I believe the quote that he gave us was for replacing all the way down to the original decking. I think there are actually 2 layers of roofing on this.
is there-
I believe so.
and is that a rubber membrane up there, or?
I believe so, yes.
Gary?
You mentioned asbestos and those tile and that mastic. Have we done any remediation in there, or
No.
and do these numbers that you gave us, or somebody gave us, include the cost of remediating that asbestos?
Most of the asbestos has been remediated. We haven't done much with the floor tile itself because as long as the floor tile is in good condition, which it obviously isn't at this point, there's not people in there, but we haven't had to remove it. But, and I'm not sure what year it was, but we had a company come in and remediate all of the asbestos, the pipe covering that was in the crawl space. They went through and sealed everything and removed it, with the exception of the floor tiles. The second part of your question, as far as the removal of it, I think that quote was for the demolition of the building, and for the information I had heard was that it would be watered down. It wouldn't have to be remediated before it was taken down. It could be taken down, and as long as it was kept wet, and then just hauled off with the rest of the debris.
As long as it's been encapsulated, that's correct. Is there any broken pipes in that section, Kurt?
Not so much broken pipes. It's kind of a hassle. It's steam radiators, steam heat, and keeping that going throughout the winter's an issue. There's always been problems with rust within the system, and steam traps get plugged up, and actuators don't work. So during the winter, we go through and keep a pretty close eye on the temperatures.
Any other questions on this?
So this particular section was built during the war, and that's why it's so poorly constructed and rapidly deteriorating in comparison to the rest of the building, correct?
My information was that the annex was built in 2 sections. There was actually 2 buildings there. The first half was built in 1941, which, of course, the war was going on at that time, but there was such a stockpile of bricks that they used those to construct the first part of that. The second half, which is what we're seeing here, was completed in 44. At that point, all the stockpile had been depleted, so the wartime bricks weren't quite as sturdy as the other bricks because those supplies were going for war efforts and things. That's what I was told by the architect that looked
So
at it.
this deterioration is based on the brick material, not on the lack of our maintaining that section?
It's part of it. That's the biggest part of it is the material itself. But there are also, obviously some maintenance issues with it as well.
So, and then getting back to Patsy's question, on the courthouse, are we throwing good money after bad? If it's a, and it's
No, I
mixing
understand.
oranges with apples and apples and oranges, but what I'm saying is, I could see the interior of that is saying, well, if I see something leaking, stop the leak right away, put a new roof on. If there needs tuck point right away, and try to preserve that building as much as we can. But if we just lease the part that's rentable, lease it, and then just forget about the rest, and then we should spend several $1,000s or $100,000 to demolish it. I would have liked to have restored it and refurbished it so that we could continue to gain revenue from it. So I'm just trying to weigh in the demolition versus repair versus what went wrong and why is it in such poor condition.
I
If
understand.
I may, Kurt.
Good.
That's what will happen to our other buildings if we don't do preventive maintenance. I would say there's been a lack of tuck pointing, caulking, and other necessary repairs because the budgets have always gone elsewhere. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's why this thing becomes an important issue. It's not just because those bricks were faulty. I'm sure that plays a big part in it, but I can look at that picture right there and tell you that a lot of the mortar has shifted. You can see the building bricks are shifting. He told you about the top cap. So if no maintenance is being done and no money is allocated for maintenance, and it's going on dream projects, that's what's gonna happen to our buildings.
What would be the cost of demolition?
I believe it's in the, Alan has it in the packet.
140?
And Geraldo, I was glad you clarified which war it was, because Jay was thinking Civil War.
Not when you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Kirk. After no other questions about the photographs,
Is it pertaining to the buildings? Then go, hang on, go right ahead, Patsy.
The lack of spine is what you're pointing out of previous boards. For 140,000, that building could have been maintained, and now the expense to demolish it is 140,000. I mean, this is bizarre decision-making, and I don't understand this. I don't understand, this is 500,000 some square feet of space. We have no comprehensive plan for this county campus as to what our space needs are. So we're ready to spend money to demolish something because we created this huge problem, because we didn't take care of it. And then we have all these figures of how much it would cost to renovate it. So the answer is, let's demolish it, and we've already chosen a firm without bids going out for the demolition of something that's going to cost $140,000. I don't understand this, and there are chairs now and past chairs of facilities. Where is the leadership so we aren't in these kind of situations now that the present board is mopping up all this costs that weren't being taken care of previously?
Patsy, if I may, when Mr. Beckett was chair of this committee, is when that nursing home became vacant. An extensive study was done. We went over there many times and looked at it. All that's in the past minutes. At that time, there was strong talk of tearing the whole building down.
Good thing I
Because you
wasn't
had to
on the
find a
board.
suitable tenant that was willing to do a lot of work on their own, and we did. Aaliyah stepped up to the plate. If you've been through that building recently, which I don't know if you have or haven't, to fix that, we're talking a lot more money than what's being projected, and you quoted 500,000 square feet, it's 52,000 square feet.
Oh, I misspoke, right.
Okay, well, I wanted
Sorry.
that for the record,
Yes.
as you like to say. Yeah, we both do. But anyway, that's where and Elias now has been a good renter. Speaking from experience, I was on the base reuse committee when Schnute closed. We have buildings now that have sat so long, and they were built in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s. They're worse than this because of no upkeep and water penetration and what have you. And really, the best recourse, you're going to spend more money cleaning the mold, fixing the windows, doing the floor tile. You would spend more money doing the remediation on that building if you went out and got quotes and we had to hire an engineer than if we demolish it and build a new one in its place. They're wanting it, according to what I've read, alleviated because of the situation there. And I think, if my memory serves me right, I was drinking coffee with Dr. Kamanoff when he told me he thinks he may have been sick because he walked through that building. Am I correct in that assessment? So what you're saying is what I've been beating the drum for since you've been coming to these meetings. Studies and all that are fine, but we need to put the money back in and do the work. We probably had several studies on that building if we all look. So with that said, I'll let Alan finish. I'm sorry. Oh, wait a minute. Geraldo.
I had one additional question, which is lead or follow up on what Patsy says. was this an RFP put out for request for proposals for demolition, or was this just given? And what is the total amount that we have to go over in order to put an RFP? Is it $25,000 and then an RFP goes out, or is it under 100,000, or is there a limit?
What is being requested tonight is that the facilities director and county administrator negotiate the scope of services and contract with IGW Architecture, which I believe is what Ms. Petrie is referring to. The RFP limit is $30,000.
$30,000.
The contract with IGW will not be anywhere near that amount because they're only going to help write the bid documents. The bids will ultimately go out as bids and be approved by the county board for the actual demolition. And the primary reason for recommending IGW is because when ILEAS took over this facility, they spent $3 million of their own money to remodel it for their own purposes, and IGW was the firm that did it. So IGW already has extreme familiarity with this building, which I believe, and Alan concurs, I'm sure, gives us an advantage rather than bringing in an architect who has no familiarity with the building for this particular project. So that is the basis for the recommendation of going with them. And when it comes to actually spending the dollars, it will come back to the board because there will actually be a bid for the demolition portion of it.
Thank you for that clarification, Deb. No? Pardon? No. Pardon.
I would like to speak to recommendation number 2. I wonder if this is the appropriate time, or do we need to go a little further into this? And I would like also, I'd like to respond in part to the recommendation of hiring IGW and the reason for that, if I could, at the appropriate time. So let me know when that is.
Any other questions concerning what we're talking about? Okay, Gary, you have the floor.
Well, I've heard this argument before, and to some degree on the courthouse that we're just now looking at. We hired IGW, and I want to go on record, this is a very reputable firm. I think they're quite capable, and but there's a but. We heard the same argument that they would be the most likely to do the work because they have done previous work, they have the plans, and they should be more competitive than anybody else. If you'll go back to page 5, I believe it is, and look at the estimate that IGW has prepared, and if we look at the total estimate, including the contingent, of $256,840, and their not-to-exceed fee, which, believe me, will end up being the final fee. It always does, and having done some of this kind of work, it does. $41,330. Without the engineering fee, without the printing, would be 16.1%. If we include the printing, then we're looking at an engineering fee of 18%. And then I've included the contingencies in that. So, and I can assure you, these are very close to what most architect firms around town would be glad to do the work for, would have been glad to do the courthouse. So it doesn't necessarily follow that they'll be more competitive because they've already done the plans. And it seems to me when we use this kind of logic, we lock ourselves into one firm, and there are other areas within the county doing the same thing. And again, I have no problem with this particular firm, but I do have a problem with us locking ourselves in and unfairly excluding people around town that could really use some work right now. There are a lot of architectural firms that are really needing some work within this county. So that is the problem I have with just automatically asking IGW to do the work. Now, it's a small contract. We will have to get City of Urbana sign-off, a permit. We'll have to file at least a 10-day notice to the IEPA that we're going to do this because of the previous asbestos. And there will have to be supervision. That place will have to be continually watered, you're right. And we'll have to justify or document where each load went. We've got to be sure that we have documents in our file that all this material that we take away from here goes into a landfill that's capable of taking this kind of material. So there'll be some engineering work involved. It's not going to be a small amount, and unfortunately, it's going to be a fairly good percentage based on the demolition, and it's just the nature of the work. But that's kind of the logic I'm looking at, and that's why I'm a little bit concerned that we continue hiring one firm to do work, job after job, just because they've done previous work, and we're not including others around town that could really use the work and probably do just as well. So thank you.
I just kind of want to second exactly what Gary said, because I just generally like the idea of an open bidding process and opening up these projects to many people in the county, especially, when we've talked about minority contracting and things in here before. Now, I realize there's plenty of difficulties and all of that, but I certainly philosophically agree with the idea of opening up bidding as wide as we can.
I have another question. I'm just going to throw this out here because as we're thinking of, Mr. Harkey indicating about going green, shouldn't we also be reconsidering the way we recycle material? Especially, I look at the windows and they look in pretty good conditions. And I think a lot of that glass and a lot of that brickwork, because I work with brick around my house, and I would like to see that, instead of being thrown all in a landfill, to be perhaps put out for recycling as we move forward on green, how would I say, green environmental waste disposal, instead of just hauling it away and paying that cost to haul it and continuously fill the landfill. So I was just thinking about, because I know when we did the Champaign Public Library, a lot of that glass went for recycling, and that's why that is a green building. And perhaps our green person back there could maybe make a comment towards the disposal of the content. If we decide to go with demolition, if we could resalvage and maybe save some money by not filling up our landfills. John?
I was going to say, I think absolutely. Are there any copper water lines and things in this building? I mean, those are things we absolutely should be going in and pulling out.
I would venture to say, based on the age, they're all going to be galvanized.
Galvanized? Okay.
That's a good thought overall, though, but that's something we'll have to work into contracts. It's not in this one. Deb, is there a issue with the lease? When's it coming due?
This is a request from Ilias, and the lease expires December 31st. And I don't think Ilias cares who we hire to do the work. I think Ilias cares that there's a commitment that this demolition will take place in order for us to move forward with the negotiation of the lease. So if the committee wants to provide some different direction with regard to how we proceed, I think at the very least, hopefully the committee can give some confirmation that we will proceed with demolition of this section, because Ilias also has issues, and Mr. McAvoy is here from Ilias if he needs to speak to it. They have issues with regard to funding. We need to work this out from their perspective so that they can document with their funders what the lease will be and things of that nature.
Quiz.
So I want to talk a little bit about the lease. I had a question from someone via email regarding the terms of the lease. I think you said earlier, Deb, that Ilias did $3 million worth of improvements to the building,
That's a ballpark. I believe that's.
somewhere around there,
Yeah.
not maybe that much, or
Maybe
maybe a little
It was somewhere
more.
between 2.8 and 3
And-
million, I'm fairly certain.
And would I be right in assuming that most of that work went towards the office space, the
It went to
$8
the
a square foot areas?
52,620 square feet, for which they pay $5 a square foot.
$5 a square foot?
And tree cutting and parking lot.
Okay,
Right.
so looking at the overall cost of the lease, if I add that value in of the stuff that they funded, they seem to be about in the ballpark of what you would pay if you went other places in town for, let's say, less prime office space.
Yes,
Not bad office space, but not prime office
Right.
space. So it doesn't seem out of whack from a standpoint, and the other space that's basically, it's not even, I don't know if I'd call it warehouse space, it's just like open, covered areas, inside areas. A lot of these terms don't look very different than something I saw in downtown Champaign just a few years ago for space. So I don't know that it's completely out of whack. I guess the question that I'm going to eventually get to here is, if there wasn't a lease renewal, would we own the improvements?
yes,
Okay, so there's a big investment
Yes.
in this building
yes.
on Ilias's part. And they were able to do a lot of those improvements based on grant funding. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
So that's assets that we have thanks to grants
Correct,
now for the county.
right.
Okay. I'd be curious, because this is important, and this is I don't know if you could call this an improvement, but I consider this an improvement to the space. I would wonder if the cost of demolition wouldn't be something under negotiation as far as participatory situation with the tenant.
If you
you wanna
want
put
to talk about the terms of negotiation, you can go into closed session to do that.
Okay. Well, I don't, yeah, okay, I don't want to do that.
Okay.
I don't want to go into specifics.
Okay,
But it seems to me that, we're already in a very good rate situation, and there's a lot of investment in that. I think it's a good time to negotiate. And I don't know, I think our first recommendation is to start that negotiation. I think we've said enough here tonight to put some things on the table as far as guidance.
right. But I would just reiterate that I don't think we can negotiate fully with them until we know what the outcome is of this space that we've brought to you this evening. Whether or not the county board intends to demolish it,
Are the recommendations out of order then?
perhaps.
Okay.
Following up on what Quiz said, I guess I would look at it, and I'm going to use Chanute. I know you work for the U of I, but the Air Force Base, there was a lot of buildings that sat empty, and the square footage cost was a lot less than what we're seeing here. And the folks that rented the spaces basically didn't do a whole lot of upkeep or needed repairs. We've got a good neighbor. They stepped up to the plate. I'm working with them. They've accommodated us when our room was being remodeled. I'm sure we didn't pay them anything. I think that sometimes when we see something good, we got to remember how it got to that point, because, like, again, I'm going to stress, Mr. Beckett and a lot of us were of the mindset at that time that due to the issues in that building, it was going to be tore down. And the grant money they got, and when I hear the word grant, and I hope this gentleman can clarify this, that was probably grants specific to the things they were dealing with, because it came through the terrorism stuff and everything. It isn't something that the county could use to go out and get a grant to renovate a building unless we were going to use it for such. Am I correct, sir?
It would have been Homeland Security.
There you go.
Like a building grant. And as far as grants go, the grant money that was there 3 years ago is not there today.
That's a lot of grants, and but when we're doing that, at least I want to be fair with them. They've been a good neighbor. They've done a lot of work, and they never know in the next 5 years if they'll even be there. They could pull the plug on them, and then we've got a beautiful building that we can make into the clerk's office. But what we need to do is get back to the point here of this recommendation that the board needs to decide what it wants to do with an RFP, or if they want to go with the firm as recommended. So there's no motion on the floor, so I will accept a motion. Go ahead, Gary.
I'd like to move that the county facilities committee directs the facilities director and the county administrator to negotiate for the demolition of the building, and that furthermore, that an RFP for engineering services for the engineering work related thereto be sent out.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Busey?
I would like to ask that because this is under the RFP and bidding requirements of the county's purchasing policy, if that could be an informal RFP process so that we don't have to meet all the timeline requirements of the formal bidding process and the legal publications. I mean, if we can simply draft an RFP and send it to the local AE firms and get responses from them so that we can do it more expeditiously, I would just request that be considered because this does not, I do not believe this is going to hit a dollar figure that would require that formal process.
You want to amend your,
If I may, I'd like to amend my motion to include that provision.
Second.
second has a second.
Okay.
So I guess my question would be, Deb, is if we're having, we've got a motion on the floor on that, but if that's the case, when do you think you might have that done?
I would think we could get that out and get responses back in like a 10-day time frame, wouldn't you, Alan? I mean, if it were possible
Just
to get
local.
responses before the county board meeting this month, would the committee consider an additional special meeting
That's
this
where I was
month?
going with that.
Because we don't need it to be on the board agenda, we just need approval from you to
Could we
proceed.
not do it at that same when we're talking about the other issue, that half hour before? That if you
That
can't
one's
make
in
it-
September.
Yeah.
So it would be 2 months in a row we'd be doing that. And Alan, if you don't think that's
special.
possible, it's 2 weeks.
It's possible to get the information to the architectural engineering firms. How many tours? We can try. Say it's possible we could do this, but it's going to be very hard to get responsible responses.
Quiz?
Could we also do a special meeting before one of the budget meetings as an alternative, a fallback option?
Yeah, that's a good thought.
I have a question, Stan.
Mr.
This is not speaking to the motion, but is there going to be some landscaping done after the demolition? And would that be included as part of this motion?
Alan?
That would be typically included in the non-formal RFP process. Okay, that would be a total package for design, demolition, backfill, seating, enclosures of the adjacent facilities, complete.
And then the last one, which is might be a little bit irrelevant, since we've done so much work with IGW, is there a little possibility, wiggle room, that we may get a discount since we're going with the courthouse and we've done millions of dollars of work with them?
Well, that'd depend on where their number comes in.
Could that
Geraldo.
possibly be part of the negotiation?
I'm sure they'll look at that.
Okay.
Okay, we got Patsy.
The conversation sort of has missed Mr. Rosales' suggestion about recycling materials, and one of the things that should be done first, which the university has been doing ever since I helped start PACA, was invite PACA in to see what can be salvaged and pulled out of that building before you bring in engineering firms, et cetera, to demolish it. And then second, for the landscaping, all we're talking about is putting grass there. Is that something that should be thought about in relationship to any stormwater management on the campus rather than just flattening the surface?
That's gonna help with dirt and seed, Patsy, but as far as your green and Geraldo's green on this issue, there's a host of environmental issues concerned with that building. I know. Okay, but if we go out, we really need to have some set standards before we say, well, let's let some groups come in and tell us what they want and don't want. The fear in my mind is we get someone in there and before we know it, without having set standards as to what they are liable for and what we are liable for, we could end up with a lawsuit. So I don't know if we want to go into that right now, but that's something in future contracts we should look at.
May I respond?
Oh, you can.
Okay. We have a resource, this has been done and done and done at the buildings at the university, and there have not been these problems, so I don't know why we always have this great resistance factor to take a new step and try something. This is only 5,000 square feet. This is a good time to try something. It may be nothing in there that they can, may take advantage of, but maybe there is.
Quiz.
Yeah, I think some organizations that have taken advantage of what I would call advanced recycling techniques when they demolish their buildings, they usually do so on the basis of the certification that they're trying to shoot for, usually in conjunction with the construction of a new building. And that, well, not necessarily, but the incentives for doing that kind of demolition are not geared towards this particular kind of situation. If we were creating new space and we were trying to get it certified in the long term, we would have incentives to do that. At this point, I don't know, you may have a list of incentives for us to do this, but I'm not aware of them. I mean, that's a good thing to try to do, but we are going to see the cost of the demolition go up because of that.
You're taking more man time to do.
If you don't understand that, then we can't have a conversation about this, because demolishing buildings and carefully protecting where those materials go costs more than doing it the way that it's likely going to be done. Now, we might want to invest in that, but I don't know that we have the will to do that, given what I've heard tonight.
Deb.
Going back to the agreed upon amendment to the motion based after what I said, I'm sorry. I had forgotten, and it just occurred to me that we can't select an architect engineering firm without following QBS, which means we can't get proposals from architects and engineers with their costs. We have to select the top-ranked firm based on their response without any idea of what cost is. So it makes me think perhaps you don't maybe want to entrust that to Alan and I. If it goes to the committee needing to make a decision, if you really want an RFP for this AE firm for this project, maybe you need to go back to the full-blown process. And Alan, I would welcome your comments here. It just, that did not occur to me until after what I said earlier.
I believe you are correct, Deb. It would have to be a QBS system. We cannot legally negotiate a fee
Right.
for services, for professional services. We can
Until we
negotiate a
select
scope
the
of work.
top-ranked firm.
We can negotiate a scope of work, okay, which was my recommendation, but it's either choose a firm, negotiate scope of services, or QBS system.
I would add that there's no requirement here to, you're fully within your authority and legal requirements and even county purchasing guideline requirements to go ahead with negotiating with a firm with whom you have an established positive working relationship, which is what we have with IGW.
Any questions by anybody? Gary, any comments?
No, not really. I stand by what I already requested.
We've got a motion on the floor, we've got a second. But that motion, I would assume, is invalid.
I believe it's Mr. Maxwell's original motion, which is to have us conduct an RFP process to select an AE firm for this project. And that would be, again, under the full QBS system, which means this committee is also probably going to have to designate itself for a subcommittee to evaluate the responses. And we won't know about the actual cost with that firm until we've selected that firm as the top-ranked vendor, and then we can negotiate with that firm the scope of work and the cost of the services.
Gary?
Well, we'll try. What is the
My name is Mick McAvoy. I do work with ILEAS, and I know this came to the board as a request from Jim Page, and so thank you for taking this much time just to consider this. I don't think, though, it's so much our request that the building be demolished, and it's not, and we're not trying to set some kind of an arbitrary or artificial time limit on this so that we make you move quickly or anything like that. I think, taking one step back, we're working under the understanding that that east section, to me, it's a U, that the section we're talking about, and half of it sort of makes an L. It's on the east side of the U. That east little section is something that can't be used. It's not that we don't want to use it. It's just that it's unhealthy for people to be in there, and it's just a situation that we definitely want to continue using the office space that's been renovated. We do want to still use the other areas that haven't been renovated that we can safely use. So we're kind of working under the assumption that it can't be used. So if it can't be used, we're really not even trying to tell the board what we think needs to be done. It's just that we understood that demolition is the smartest, most effective, cost-effective way to go, probably the safest for people working in the building or people even just walking through. I know there's been one complaint. So there is we're not trying to create some kind of a time limit. The only time limit is the lease itself. And that's December 31st. I think the most recent version of the lease, obviously we can always negotiate a new lease, but the most recent version has a couple options for ILEAS to, I can't remember what you call it, the option where you kind of automatically renews. There's a 90-day term on that, I'm pretty sure, so that puts us into the end of September. Our time constraint is that our budget's by grant, and the grants come out yearly, but the federal government is constantly changing the dates within which our grants must be spent. If we don't spend the money, if we don't obligate it, it goes away. I'm pretty sure that right now we've got it worked out where with a 3-year negotiated extension, we can handle it. We can tell you we've got that much money. We're ready to go ahead. But then the amount that it's going to cost is I can't remember the numbers. I know it's $5 per square foot of the office space, but there's like another $2.80, something like that. That's going to be affected by the little L-shaped part, the east part that I believe it can't be used. And correct me if I'm wrong. If it's something that can be used, then we need to, I think, maybe take another couple of steps back and talk some more. But anyway, so we're not trying to create some kind of a time crunch on you. We do need to know that this is something that everybody's taking seriously, and we're going to put good faith effort into it. And we do need to get something. I mean, December is still a ways away, but obviously time goes real fast when you're looking at it's going to go out to the next board meeting and the next one after that.
Mike, again, timeline, if we do this, we're talking about doing it within this fiscal year 2013 budget, or are we talking about doing it in fiscal 2014?
Following this recommendation would be, the demolition would not be started until 2014. Which I don't think is an issue as far as the building is barricaded off, and we take appropriate steps, take the time we need to pick out a firm. I don't see an issue with that at all, as long as we know that's what the board wants us to do, so we can negotiate correctly with ILEAs.
If we just exclude that square footage from the contract, with the understanding that it will be demolished at some point, wouldn't that solve the problem for now? So you can sign the lease knowing that this is excluded and then take your time to do whatever is the right way to do with the demolition and then remove the urgency? I mean, isn't the urgency part of having to negotiate the lease?
Yes, and an
Okay, so if we
indication
agree-
from the committee that demolition is intended regardless of the time frame is appropriate.
But even if we don't demolish, we know they're not going to use it. So if we say, okay, well, we charge you really for what's usable, this is not a usable space, we're thinking about demolishing or we're not.
I think
it's
there are
really-
some concerns with regard to health and safety if this is not demolished. That would be an issue if ILEAS didn't know one way or the other what direction the county was going to take.
Okay, so if we say we are planning to demolish, we'll
Right.
take our time to figure out whatever the right bidding process is, and meanwhile, we'll exclude it from the lease. You can go ahead and do the lease, and then,
Right,
would that work?
right.
Okay.
Just for a quick refresher, in case somebody's watching who hasn't seen this go before, and I know I've seen this before. QBS, what's the timeline on QBS?
Oh, it's been a while since we did it. 3 months?
And QBS, is that our standard, or is that a state
That's state. It's
requirement?
It's a requirement.
So we can't change that?
No.
We can't rework our capabilities so that we could do it differently?
No.
If we go down that path, we're going to take 3 months to do this.
Right.
And I believe the last time I saw QBS that we went and did, we ended up selecting the firm that we were going to choose in the first place anyway, because there were only 3 firms that were possible to do it, and the committee that scored them number 1. Is that,
Right.
am I
That's
remembering that
right.
correctly?
You are remembering that correctly.
Okay. So we're gonna spend 3 months on the off chance that one of the multiple engineering and architecture firms that'll choose to get involved with this is going to be better than the one that we already know.
Right.
Is that a safe
That's a safe assumption.
summary?
And
And it's not gonna make a diddly bit of difference on cost.
It should not. And I would also just, for your further edification, point out that it creates an additional burden of work on an outgoing facilities director who has a number of other things to close up. I'm not even sure he would be able to get it all done necessarily. It creates an additional burden of work for every firm who is going to respond, and this is a very small project.
Yeah, and so to sum up, even though I may have been the person who seconded this motion, I will probably vote against it because I don't think this is the particular moment to exercise that path.
I kind of agree with James because you have just educated me on the situation. I do agree we need to open our bidding process up to people. I think we do. Obviously, the state has mandated a very complicated regime that has nothing to do with saving any money, only to do with the qualifications of the bidder. So I, again, would be fine with us going back to just using IGW to do the initial part of this, because then we go ahead and bid out the actual construction and all of that to other firms. So, and that's where the real money lies in this. So it seems to me to move this along, what we need to do is a motion to allow the facilities director and the county administrator to negotiate a new contract minus this 5,600 square feet, and then another motion to open up it for this architectural firm to start looking at the demolition. Because it seems obvious to me we need to demolish this piece, because, as you said, the remediation costs are going to be way above even, you know, I mean, renting it out at $5 a square foot, you know, we're not gonna get our money back for a long, long time. And it's obviously poisonous to some extent because of all the mold and things in there. And I know I'm an allergenic person that would not enjoy going in this room, I'm sure. So, I mean, I can see that we're gonna you know, it seems to me we're gonna have to demolish it. Ilias can go forward with the assumption that we are gonna move on that, especially if we pass something out of this committee, and go ahead and develop the lease based around the less square footage.
The proper procedure then, from my point, it would be to withdraw the motion. And I have to get, what's the procedure? We have to get a permission from the second.
Motion's withdrawn, now we need a new motion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would like to move that we authorize the facilities director and the county administrator to negotiate a scope services contract with IGW Architecture for the design bid, construction phase of demolition of the west annex of the complex located at 1701 East Main.
Second.
Are we going to do that as a separate motion?
We have a motion and a
I
second
don't
on
know.
the floor. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Now back to the lease.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we issue or allow the county facilities director and the county administrator to negotiate a new contract with Ilias minus the square footage that we intend on demolishing.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Gonzalez. Any discussion? Patsy?
Just a question of clarification. The square footage that potentially will be demolished, is that part of the 52,620 square feet?
600 square feet that is training area that has been unfinished. So it's part of the $2.08 per square foot.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you for the
Space.
clarification.
Any other questions?
Mr. J has a question.
Mr. J?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
I've been quiet, listening to this. This really is frustrating to me. I spent a lot of time in this particular area of the little nursing home. Is this cloud represent the area that's going to be demolished? Is that a fair assumption, Alan? That little cloud area?
That is correct.
Is there a reason that we stopped in the middle of that hallway instead of going over to square it off?
Yes, sir, there is. The reason being, that little section, clouded section, is its separate building. Another reason is the section on the very south end is still actively used, and this connecting link has all the utilities and material
Okay.
lines going through it.
Okay, that's good enough. I was a little disappointed. I think Ilias, by the way, was a godsend for us, and it's been a good relationship we've had. I was under the impression they were using all of this. I had no idea. I know that it was deteriorating, but of course it was because we weren't spending any money on it. And I guess they weren't shooting bullets through the walls or anything, but I don't think it would have hurt this end if they had have, probably less to demolish.
airflow.
But my point was why I didn't quite understand why we cut it in the middle, because that didn't look like that would be feasible. And now I assume there will be a cost because we'll have to close that up at some point.
That's included in the RFP.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to name that J Hall. Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, sir, for sitting up there at the table. Other business. Anybody have any other business they'd like to bring forward or any questions? I know we did a tour of the nursing home. If anybody would like to do a tour down the road before it gets too cold, after we get our new superintendent, it might be good for us to go through a building with him or her down the road, so think about that. Quiz?
Do we know when the coroner's getting his new refrigerator? Because going to that building to do a tour might be.
It is installed, and we were in the process of hooking up the service today.
And that's the one I wanted to see, because I've been in it. So we'll put that down, Beth, as a future tour, probably after the new person is seated, and we can really warm up to him. And let the coroner size him up. Chair's report. The only thing I have there is, again, I want to thank Alan and all of his staff, mainly Alan, though, because he's going. Those other folks will still be here. Alan, I've known you for 10 years, off and on. You've done a wonderful job, whether it was driving the bus or just talking. I find you to be the type of individual that is very down-to-earth and on-hands person. And I really appreciate, spending the time I have with you and talking with you, so thank you.
Thank you.
And I hope Deb throws a heck of a party for you. Designation of items to be placed on consent agenda. So that is going to be the capital improvements projection. Oh, that goes to finance, you're absolutely right. And then there was a no vote on the recommendation, so that doesn't go to the full board. The Elias lease renewal goes, and that is it. Am I correct?
Actually, we won't have anything on the Ilias lease to go this month. And I believe that
you're
the Illinois Green Business Association, your direction will include that in the public property, in the physical plant budget for fiscal 2014 based on the committee's action tonight. So that does not need to go to the full board either.
Okay.
It will be part of the budget presentation,
Okay.
but your action basically said that's what you want in the physical plant budget for next year.
There you have it. Adjournment. Do I have a motion? Okay, we got it. Second? All in favor? Okay, thank you.